Myself, I'm Betsy Carlson. I am the Community Science Coordinator at the Marine Science Center and also the coordinator for the Marine Mammal Stranding Network of East Jefferson County. And Holly, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Holly. I'm the volunteer program educator. And for those of you not familiar with that position, I help with the social media, the volunteer program as a whole, education programs, and of course, the Stranding Network.
And Holly's the person that you'll be connecting with most likely, most of the time, because she's one who monitors the call line most days. Then we have a couple other people who fill in, like myself or other AmeriCorps who fill in at other days. So chances are you'll hear from Holly. Just to refresh everybody's memory, we are the Port Townsend Marine Science Center Marine Mammal Stranding Network. We originally were formed as the East Jefferson County Marine Mammal Stranding Network. Our area that we cover is East Jefferson County in Washington. And we have a special agreement that we renew every year with NOAA that gives us special authority to respond to marine mammals that are stranded. Stranded animals can be animals that are dead on shore, that are alive on shore, that are on shore and doing okay, but they're in a place where it really isn't a good place for them to be, like, downtown Port Townsend. And an animal that is stranded and cannot get itself out of a situation, such as an orca that's stranded several years ago near Dungeness Spit. So we respond to that. Marine mammals are all protected by the Marine Mammal Protection Act that was established in 1972. And the people who oversee federal agencies that oversee the implementation of protecting marine mammals are NOAA and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, for our purposes, the only animal that they're responsible for in this area would be sea otters. So we primarily, and since we don't have sea otters per se around here, the primary group that we work with is NOAA, and our agreement is with NOAA. And we're responsible to respond to all live and dead strandings. I put a note here to say we're not responsible for carcass disposal. That means if an animal washes up on private property, first of all, we have to get permission to go on the private property, and it is the responsibility of the property owner to deal with the carcass. But we do our best to try and help that out, or dig a hole, or there's certain things we can and cannot do with carcasses, but don't feel bad if you can't do anything about it. It's okay. So we are the happy center of this matrix of different stranding network groups throughout Puget Sound and the Salish Sea within the US. So these, from north to south, there's a variety of different nonprofits and agencies, and actually way out here is the Makah tribe, that they respond to their area. So all these different groups are working together. The groups that we tend to work mostly with are Faro Marine Life Center. We sometimes share this area near Dungeness and Sequim. And we call the Fish and Wildlife folks, because here's the other, they oversee Kitsap. And Diana Lamborn is the pinniped person that we work with most frequently for pinniped strandings. And then Cascadia Research Collective, they're a nonprofit based down in Olympia area, and they are like the leads on cetacean research in our area, at least that we work with for any kind of necropsies. So this is our group. This is all these different, and it's unique for us to have a variety of different groups that are working together, but we do our best and we help each other out whenever we can. Okay, so our zone, the area that we respond to in East Jefferson County, goes from the sort of south end of Dungeness Spit and all the shoreline and coastline all the way down to just around Brennan. we will at one point ask you to sign up for zones that you would like to respond to, or confirm which zones you would like to respond to. And we can send this map on to you if you don't remember which the zones are, which I can completely understand why you wouldn't. So we have two different kinds of strandings we strand to: live stranding and dead strandings. And believe it or not, the animal on the bottom of these photos is alive. And Joanne was just describing seeing her swim by her house. This picture was taken 2 years ago. So I threw this in, even though it's a little bloody and a little grim. I'm sorry to say that the wounds were inflicted by a male. It's a female elephant seal. They had bad wounds, but they healed within months. And that's something to remember, is they're quite resilient. And they really do know how to take care of themselves. We just kind of have to get out of the way sometimes. So, and then we need, every once in a while, we need to help them out. So if you respond to a live stranding, you want to check the animal, just see what the animal's doing. Is it breathing heavily? Is there apparent wound? If, for example, if it's a seal pup, are there, has it been bitten, or there's any signs of potential human interaction? Those are things we look for, things like gunshot wounds, things like propeller marks, and also we look for tags. A lot of these animals, if they've been rehabilitated and then released, will have a tag, or if they've been captured, they will have a tag. Believe it or not, this elephant seal actually had a tag on her flipper, but they're really hard to see. And if it's a live animal, you'll probably just need a good pair of binoculars to be able to see that tag. But it's something to look for. Take photos. I'm going to tell you 500 times probably, but photos are like gold to us. And with our smartphones, they're really easy to take and send. Email to Marine Mammal Stranding Network, MMSN, at PTMSC.org. That's kind of our main hub, and we all check it. And that's where our phone messages actually come into our phone line, and then they get a notification is sent to our email. So we're always checking the email, even to know if we have a phone call. So live stranding, you check on an animal. You've got a live animal there, you want to set up your perimeter. And we have in our kits, and those of you who don't have kits, we'll talk about getting kits. The kits have big plastic ribbon that says share the shore or caution live animal. And we do the best we can to set up a perimeter. NOAA recommends 100 yards, completely understandable that you cannot set up a 100-yard perimeter. There isn't 100 yards from the cliff to the water on this beach. And if somebody needs to walk by, they'll walk by. So the best thing you can do for a live stranding is to just let the public know that there's an animal there, that we need to give it some space, and to please keep their dog on a leash, and not let the dog interact with the animal, both for the dog's sake as well as for the animal's sake, because they are mammals and they do carry diseases that are transmissible to other mammals, dogs and humans. So it's always very important to put your protective gloves on, keep people away from them, and give the animals their space and the ability, certainly with the harbor seal pups, to go back into the water. The other strandings we respond to are dead stranded animals. Bruce and Andrea might recognize this photo. They took it. They did a great job of taking this photo with a little label that they had in their kit. They wrote down the number EJC, which is East Jefferson County, the year, and then the number of the stranded animal. And that number you would get when we call you. If we know for sure it's a dead animal, we've seen some pictures. Sometimes we get reports of these animals. We've seen a photo already, so we know we have some information we can share with you, or we will share with you before you head out. So then you would get that number and put it on this little thing. It helps us keep track of our photos, but it's also just a good record. And it's a little scale thing. So these are all in centimeters. This male elephant seal was 13 feet long. They also wrote on the back of the animal, EJC 2018-2022. that's called marking. And everybody should have a grease pen. Sometimes you have to make sure that the paint on the end of the grease pen has been rubbed off because they do dry up a little bit. We have extras if you need them. We can always resupply you with grease pens. But it's good to mark the animal, because then we remember, or then we'll know if it washes away and washes up somewhere else, if it's already been recorded, or if it, something new comes along, then we'll know that it's not one we've seen yet. So you measure from the nose to the tail, and that's the length measurement. And that's pretty much the only measurement you really need to take for your level A. The level A, for those of you who don't know, is a form that we use to fill in the data about each stranded animal that we come in contact with. And Holly is going to explain that in a minute. For those of you, we've got our new form that's coming out, but it's still okay to use the old forms. Use them up. The information is all the same, just the newer ones are a little shorter. And we're going to show you the new level A form, and it gets sent to Marine Mammal Stranding Network at ptmsc.org. You can take a picture of it or scan it or mail it in or bring it in, but we want all of our level A forms as soon as we can, especially if we end up doing a necropsy on the animal, because then we need to enter that data from the level A forms into the NOAA database. All of the level A forms go there, but once it's in the NOAA database, the lab that is doing the study on any of the tissue and that kind of information then gets also uploaded to the database, but they need our level A to be started so that they can add to it. So it's important that we get those forms as soon as we can so we can get the information in there. Great. Holly.
So this is what the new form looks like. And as Betsy mentioned, the level A and human interaction forms are government documents and quite detailed and a lot of different places. So we figured, Betsy, I had the idea of simplifying it, making it easier for you all, since you all aren't called to respond to a stranding every week or every month. So this might be an easier thing to look at and refresh your memory. So pretty simple. Start with the level A information at the top. That'll be your basic information. As Betsy said, we'll give you the stranding number, common names, so just what the animal is. If you need help identifying, we can help with that. Your name, the date, and then as Betsy said, we really want you to take photos if you're able to. And we also included a list there to remind you of what things we really like to have photos of. Of course, the whole animal is important, but closer photos of the different body parts is always helpful, like the head, limbs, any unusual marks or injuries, both sides of the body if you're able to, and tags or brands. So that's just an added reminder on this form in case you need it. Then the location information, you can use your smartphone GPS to look up that lat and long, however it's easiest for you and how you determined it. On to morphological, so do your best to sex and age it, and this is where those photos will come in handy for us. So, I mean, depending on the decomposition, could be easy or difficult, but we can always help with photos. Also where your measurement will go, whole or partial animal. So if it's missing a head or more than its head, then that would be partial, but still important to measure it either way so we can get a size reference, and that'll help with aging. And then we may ask you in certain scenarios to collect body part samples or tag samples. So that's where you'll mark if you took any of those, and you'll describe it there. Below that is tag data. So you'll look mostly on flippers and limbs for tags, but just looking over the animal closely for those are important, and you'll include that information there. This is also where you'll include if you marked it with a grease pen, so that's considered a tag, and all the information we need for that, color, location, what you wrote. Easiest thing to write is the stranding number, but it's up to you. And then it goes into dead or live animals. So depending on which you have a dead animal, You'll mark how decomposed it is and what was done with the carcass when you were done. If you have a live animal, you'll go to that second page, what happened to it, and what was determined the condition. If it was sick, abandoned, all those options there for you. And then we also included a reminder there because, as Betsy mentioned before, with live animals, you'll be setting up a perimeter. So if you're the last person to be monitoring the animal for the day, we'll want to take all the signs and caution tape down so they don't turn into marine debris, we don't lose it. So that's your reminder there for that. That's all the level A information. So again, all that is found on the level A form. This is just a lot simpler and the major things that we need from you guys when you're out there. So the next part is the human interaction. This is a little bit sometimes harder to determine because injuries like from predation from birds could look like gun wounds, but just do your best with this section. Starts off with just, is there a sign of human interaction? If there's fishing line on it, that's something obvious that you can write yes for. If it's a little bit more uncertain, you can just write could not be determined. And as long as we have photos, that's great. You'll look for gear or debris. So that should be pretty straightforward as well, unless it's like bullets, but that's a less of a common thing to run into. So you'll mark if you found that and describe it. Photos also, of course. And lastly, human interaction lesions. So that's where it could be hard to determine whether it's predation on land, like from a bird, another animal on land, but just do your best to mark it and take photos. And then lastly, there's a spot just for any additional notes that you think would be helpful for us to know. On the bottom, you'll see a reminder to email us or send us a copy of that form once you finish this form. You don't have to transfer that over to the level A or anything. You can just send us this form. You can email it to us. Again, there's our stranding email as a reminder. And then at the top of the page, we included our stranding network hotline number. It is important to note most of the time when you call that number, and you guys probably have experienced this already, that it goes into a voicemail, which is emailed to us. But most of the time when you're out on a stranding response, you'll have either Betsy or I's cell numbers, and you can call us and get in contact with us pretty easily that way, but didn't want to put our cell phones on the form. So you'll have our stranding number, or if you're out on a call and want to give that number out to someone of the public who is walking by, we have that easily there for you. That's our new form. Hopefully it's pretty easy to use and a lot easier than the level A.
Thanks, Holly. Oh, this is the fun part. We're going to just remind ourselves about the different animals that live here that we'll be looking for, talk about some helpful ways to ID them, and some typical stranding calls. And this particular animal, which I want you to say in your mind what you think it is, this California sea lion, it's a male California sea lion. He's got a big bump on his head. He's thermoregulating with his flipper in the air. And last summer, there was a whole raft of them in Discovery Bay of these California sea lions with their flippers up. But if you see one with their flipper up, they often look like they may be entangled, and we get calls related to them being entangled. So just know that that is a possibility. It's not the dorsal fin of a small orca. It is probably just a sea lion. All right, here is our star attraction for strandings in East Jefferson County, is the lovely harbor seal. Harbor seals are identified easily because they're the smallest of our pinnipeds. They have spotted coat. They don't have ear flaps. They have sort of short front flippers, claws on their flippers in the front, and they are like sausages on the beach. They just move, they flop around. They can't rotate their front flippers the way a sea lion can. Stranding calls, we tend to very often, especially starting in June, when the season begins for pupping in our area, we'll get calls about harbor seal pups on the beach. The sad thing is that 50% of all harbor seal pups do not make it. That's the natural number. Up until this year, the harbor seal population and we still believe the harbor seal population in this area are doing fine. Plenty of harbor seals, they're doing okay. So we're not concerned about the population of harbor seals, but we do want to take care of the pups, and we do want to reduce the interactions with human and pups on the beach. What a pup will be placed on the beach with its mom or by its mom to stay warm, take a rest, and mom will go feed and go eat herself. And then she comes back and will nurse the pup. But she will not return if there are people by the pup, or if there are animals, dogs by the pup. So it's really, really important so that mom will return, for us to set up a boundary so pups can't be disturbed. Pups are weaned within 4 to 6 weeks. They're super quickly weaned, so they're only with their mom for a very short period of time. Sometimes they are not successful weaners, and they cry a lot and they just don't do okay. And that's too bad. I mean, it's sad when we see little guys not making it. We will take harbor seals to rehabilitation if they meet certain criteria, but there's very limited rehabilitation in the state of Washington. So unless it's a, particularly a certain kind or situation of these pups, they've been weaned, or they, they're healthy enough that they may be able to succeed if we rehabilitate them and take them to a pause is probably where we take them in Linwood, or there's a new facility that's coming up in Tacoma called SR3. But there are trained people in the area can help us assess whether or not the pups should be transported. The adults we will see resting on the beach, either just chilling or sometimes they're injured. California sea lions, dark brown fur, but the females are light. It's really hard to tell sometimes if it's a female California sea lion or an immature stellar sea lion, if there's just one there. So that's okay if you don't really know. The California sea lions are dark. The males are dark. They have ear flaps. The females have ear flaps. They have sagittal crest, long front flippers, and they can walk around. These guys are climbers. They can swim and get themselves up onto a buoy. So if you hear a barking kind of sound coming from a channel marker, it's very likely a California, well, it would be a California sea lion, because Stillers don't make that sound. And there are the other sea lions in our area. Stranding calls we get for them resting on the beach, hanging out on a buoy, or swimming in the water with their flippers sticking up. Okay, Stillers. Stellar sea lions are significantly bigger than California sea lions. The California sea lion is, male gets up to 7 feet long. A stellar sea lion gets up to 11 feet long. Their necks are big and thick. They almost look like they have a mane. Very common to see them on rocks, on this one big rock off of Fort Flagler and on Marrowstone Island. Craven Rock or Seal Rock, as different people call it. So if you want to go check those out, it's a good place to see stellar sea lion. Ear flaps, large animal, and we see them around here fairly often, and see them same situations, resting or beached or wounded. We have had a stellar that was a gunshot wound, and that one needed to be dispatched, and that was pretty sad. That happened on a Sunday in the summer in Fort Worden. Huh. Northern elephant seal that's sort of our star attraction right now. We've been doing a lot of education around a northern elephant seal. The northern elephant seal that washed up on Marrowstone in 2018 has been turned into a skeleton, and we're using the bones of that for education program with Chimacum School right now. That's a whole nother story, but I thought Bruce and Andrea might appreciate that because they were very involved with that. Anyway, the northern elephant seal is the biggest pinniped we're going to find around here. And they're a success story for conservation. We're down to 100 of these animals, and they are now back and populated throughout California, and they're coming back into Salish Sea and Puget Sound. There's a female that has been returning to Anacortes area and having pups. So their numbers are increasing. Elephant seals, the males have that very prominent sort of proboscis, on their nose. They are seals, so they flop around. They have relatively short front flippers, and they don't have ear flaps. But the number one way to tell if it's a small animal and it's not obviously a male elephant seal is by looking for black whiskers. They have black whiskers. So if you see a female or a pup, one thing to look at, if you can't tell that it's not a harbor seal, is to look for those black whiskers. One of the key things about being an elephant seal is these are the ones that catastrophically molt, and they'll pull themselves up on shore, and their skin looks like they've been beaten up, and they're really sick, and they're bleeding, and they just look horrible, and that's normal. It's normal for them to go through this catastrophic molting where they shed their upper epidermis every year. Harbor porpoises. Now we're into cetaceans. So harbor porpoises are the second smallest porpoise on the planet, and they're just little wavelets. They're hard to see when they're swimming, but we get them after harbor seals. Harbor porpoises are the most common stranded animal for us in East Jefferson County. They're darker gray on their back, lighter gray underneath, and then they have a very characteristic line that goes from their mouth back to their flipper there. If you see them, look for the small dorsal that's all dark, because the other porpoise that we have in our area has a different color dorsal fin. So we don't tend to get calls as much if they're swimming the harbor, but we do want to keep a record of them. But if they're entangled or if they're washed up on the beach, we will respond for those calls. The Dall's porpoise is the other porpoise that's in this area, and it can easily be mistaken for a baby killer whale because it's black and white, and that's what people think they are. And the best thing to look for is this dorsal fin that has white coloration on it. It has a very small head and kind of a big body. And we are not seeing Dall's porpoises as much as they used to be in this area, and I don't know why. Harbor porpoises are much more common than Dall's porpoises. Dall's porpoises tend to swim in big groups, and they swim really fast, and they just have this like rooster tail splash that goes up behind them. So if you see that from your boat or from the ferry, and you see a big splash behind this small cetacean, then you'd know it's a Dall's porpoise. Okay, stranding calls are not baby orcas, but people will call in saying they think they have seen a baby orca, or swimming or beach is the kind of stranding call we get. Everybody knows what these are, I'm sure, orcas. And I'm pretty sure most of you know that we have 3 different ecotypes that come into Puget Sound. The resident killer whales or orca whales are found in the southern resident killer whales. They make the news a lot. They're found in our area. And the big killer whales, the transients, come in also into our area, and we see them fairly frequently if we're lucky. Sometimes they've even swum right by the pier, and you can hear them on our hydrophone. The Marine Science Center has a hydrophone that's part of a network of hydrophones, and you can log into that online and listen to them. The transients eat mammals, marine mammals, so they eat seals and porpoises and other whales. They'll even attack blue whales. So they tend to swim in groups, or you don't tend to see a single killer whale. They're usually a small group of them. The resident killer whales eat fish. They eat salmon. And that's part of the distinguishing characteristics between the two groups. The offshore killer whales don't tend to come in here very often, but every once in a while they do, and they tend to eat fish as well as sharks. They stay offshore. They don't come in here very often. So mostly the transients and residents are what we'll find. And getting to know our baleen whales. Of the baleen whales, there's a lot of different ones in the oceans of the world, but the ones that we tend to see are gray whales, humpbacks, and minkies. Gray whales are coming back into Puget Sound at this time of year. Humpbacks tend to come back more in the summertime, although they can be here anytime. And their populations are also a success story in that the humpback numbers are increasing, which is exciting. And minke whales are the most common whale throughout the world, and we have them here, and they tend to be solo swimmers, and we'll talk about how to identify them in a minute. Gray whales, these are the folks that are around here now. They have the longest migrations in the world. They go from Mexico to Alaska and back, or Alaska to Mexico and back. They feed in the north, and they raise their birth and breed in the south. In order to identify gray whales, kind of look for the mottled patchy skin. Often these are clusters of barnacles or lice or scarring. And then they have knobs on the back from their dorsal to the tail. You can see those knobs. And they are baleen whales, so they don't have teeth. And when they come to the surface and exhale to take another in-breath, they will blow into a heart shape spout. That's one way to identify them. Stranding calls, they have been entangled in this area. They can beach, usually dead, or they've been floating in the shipping channels, which is a problem, and they get towed to places like Indian Island, which is where we get to take care of them. We've done that a couple times. A humpback whale is significantly larger than a gray whale or an orca whale. They are dark colored with these bright, very white and long pectoral fins. They have, the reason they are called humpbacks is because they have this little hump right there. Not much of a hump, but it's a little hump, and that's why we call it humpback. And they're baleen whales as well, and they have these knobs on the nose. This is really just super characteristic of the humpback whale. And when you see it in the water, you see these bumps. That's very clearly, if you're close enough to see the bumps. Usually you just see the spout, and maybe you'll see the back. Their flukes, their underside of their tails are white, and that's used for identification. So if you ever see a humpback and you can get a picture of its fluke, there's organizations out there there's something called Happy Whale, and they are tracking, it's a community science project, they're tracking different humpbacks throughout the world to figure out who's where. Minke whales, so very gray mottled on top, and then you just see this classic kind of hook back, more pointy dorsal fin. They're smaller than humpbacks. They're more, I think, more of the size of like an orca or a little bit bigger. And they tend to be solo feeders, and you can see them feeding with feeding flocks. By that I mean, birds diving. There's a school of fish there, and the minke will be swimming in amongst it. We've got Steller sea lion, California sea lion, sagittal crest, really big bump. And though, Stellers have a bump too, which I find a little confusing, but it's not as pronounced as the California. California can look not so dark if they've been laying on the beach and dried out. Down here is elephant seal, no spotting. You don't see the speckling. So that's one way to tell the difference from that harbor seal. And the elephant seal has these black whiskers. And here's our friend the harbor seal, lots of spotting, no ear flaps. If you see this little hole right here on the side of its head, That's its ear. And often if you find them on the beach and they're no longer alive, if they've died, and there's blood coming out of that, it can look like a gunshot wound. So just think about where that hole is and consider whether or not it, is it the ear? Because that's most likely what it is. And then over here, our Dall's porpoise. This lovely thing, lighter color, dorsal fin, bright white patch. All right, I'm gonna stay away from my mouse, and here's a chance for you to try and guess your whale knowledge. I'm gonna give you a minute to think about that. All right, so what we have are gray whale. See the patching and the baleen, and a humpback with its beautiful knobs. Down here is also a humpback, kind of a humpback there, but really kind of clean, dark skin, no modeling. It's not a minke. Minke would have a bigger fin, like this one over here. So, and this one is the minke whale. Okay. So here's a scenario. So this poor guy or gal washed up on shore is actually, it's alive, and she's hanging out there, but I don't know if you can see, her skin's looking really gnarly, and she looks like she has disease and patches all over her. It's about 6 feet long, and it was reported as a wounded and injured animal on the beach. So I'm going to fill out the level A, and we'll do this together. So this is what, trying with our new level A, we would write in, so we have EJC 20, and then for the next 9 years, we're going to be able to use these forms. So 20, 21, and the number of the animal is 12. The common name is an elephant seal, because believe it or not, it has black whiskers. And Sylvia Earle was our examiner today, and it was found actually today. We took pictures. We examined it on the beach from a distance. We did not get very close. And it was at Diamond Point. We were able to put in the latitude and longitude. Whether you use minutes and seconds or minutes and degrees, it doesn't matter if it's the decimal point or however you want to enter it, that's fine. Some people use their GPS phone, they get the actual reading while they're there using their phones. Another thing you can do is go back home and say, and go on to like Google Maps and say, I think, and so that would be an estimated, I think it was about here, and it would be done on a map. So use a map, you estimate where it is, or use an actual GPS, and that's where you get the information. If you know or don't know, if you don't know, that's okay. Sometimes it's hard to tell if you can't see what it is. This could be a female or an immature male. So we don't really know. And we're not taking measurements because it's still alive. So this is a live animal, but we had really good binoculars, and we were able to see that, yes, indeed, there was a tag on the tail, on the rear flipper. And so there was information on the tag, and we could then also write in whether or not the color and all that kind of stuff. You can put that in there as well. On the other side of the form, it's a live animal. We left it at the site, so we don't have to fill anything else out because we're not transporting the animal or having to relocate the animal, which sometimes we will do. We say, yes, there's human interaction because there was a tag on the flipper, but no other signs of human interaction. Gear, yes, it's a tag. It was a green flipper tag. It was 3 inches long. You couldn't read the number because it's too far away. So other than that, we couldn't tell of any other lesions. And there's you done with your level A. Okay, this is probably the most common stranding call we get. Or not probably, it is the most common stranding call, is a young harbor seal pup on the beach And if it was all white, so a lanugo pup is a pup that has been born too early and it didn't have a chance to form, its skin wasn't developed enough to form the spots, or the fur was not developed enough to have spotted fur. So lanugo pups, just very low chance of survival, but a pup like this might have a chance. I'm just gonna move on. So another scenario would be you come across a harbor porpoise. This is a harbor porpoise, pretty dark, but you can still see that line from its mouth to its pectoral fin. There's a group of people particularly interested in harbor porpoises. If it's a fresh animal, they're looking at different kinds of bacterial infections and things that are coming into the harbor porpoise population. So we're very interested in collecting harbor porpoises when they're fresh. And last but not least, sadly, we have a deceased harbor seal, but look, it has a little tag on its flipper. And sometimes those tags are put on when an animal is released from captivity. Sometimes they're part of a study group. And if we find a tag when we can read the number, it's great to be able to, we can look up those numbers and find a little history to the animal and where it's been. Okay. One thing I wanted to mention, when they looked at this, they did a necropsy. The blubber on this animal was thick, but it had a deep slice on the back of its head. And there were no signs of teeth marks or other injuries. When you have like good blubber, it's otherwise healthy animal, but it most likely died from whatever happened to its head. And unless you see the weapon, we still can't determine whether or not it was human interaction. Okay, so our next step is everybody wants you to take some time in the next couple of days and check your stranding kits and let us know what you need. Here is the list. We will also send this to you as a follow-up email. These are the things you should have in your kit. Garbage bags in case you need to carry an animal off the beach, or even some little garbage bags. You can pick up some plastic while you're out there. Or clipboard, your slate and chalk, or your whiteboard and marker, grease pen to mark the animal, stakes to be able to attach any kind of signage to, and your PPE, your gloves. Always important to put your gloves on before you touch the animal. Don't touch the animal barehanded, please. Bring a measuring tape. If you have a longer one than the little ones we give in the kits, which are these little guys, you may want to bring those too, because sometimes the animals are bigger than a meter, which is what those measure. The bright colored vests, we have vests that have just kind of make you look official, and some people are more comfortable wearing that when they're out there. And in your folder, you should have human interaction forms, and we can help you get some of the new ones, rack cards, Sharpies, pencils, and that sort of thing, and some educational signs to put up. If you do put signs up or do put tape up, we just want to be sure that we're taking it down at the end of our time with the animals. That's what I have to share with you tonight. Great. Thanks, everybody. Great.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.